We're dealt ace-jack offsuit under the gun +1. I can actually fold this hand from this position. I like using the small blind though. I raised to 30. Everything goes as I hoped. The small blind calls, it's heads up, and we're in position against someone who's gotten a little wild in a couple hands that I've seen him play. The flop comes ace, ace, 8, rainbow. We've got trips. The small blind checks. Against certain players, I may check back. I'm not going to do that against someone who can be reckless. I bet 30 to, just give the opponent a little rope. That's all he needs. The small blind knows exactly what to do with the rope. He's some kind of an expert knotsman. He puts in the check raise to 200. Wow. If by some miracle this dude has ace 8 or pocket 8s, he's about to get a lot of money. Given how often I've seen him attempt big bluffs this session already, that seems unlikely. I don't know anybody who would check raise that big with a full house on the flop either. The vast majority of people would wait until the turn to make their move. I call for 170 more. That should set off major alarm bells in the opponent's head. The turn is the 4 of clubs. If I happen to be up against ace 4, that'd be a disaster as well. No slowing down from the small blind, he bets 440. There's no reason for me to raise, and I strongly suspect that this guy is trying to pull off the bluff of the century. I call. This would be a really great time to see a jack on the river just to solidify the win. There's still some chance that I'm not good. We don't get a jack, but we get another 4. If we were up against pocket 8s, we just got bailed out. If we were up against a hand like ace 10 or ace 8, then that's terrible because I'll be chopping or losing a lot of money. Small blind finally pumps the brakes. He checks. I kind of doubt that he has much. He probably can't call any reasonably sized bet with a hand worse than mine. It should be pretty clear by now that I'm holding at least 1 ace. I make a tiny bet of 300. Maybe the small blind will raise with air, or maybe he'll make a light call. This sizing puts him in a really annoying spot because no one wants to fold for a small amount on the river after blasting away on the flop and the turn. The player thinks it over for a minute. Then he finally calls. We show him a full house. We're not chopping it either. The opponent can't believe it. There's a possibility that we sucked out on him as he mucks his cards, and 8 is exposed on accident. If he had pocket 8s, he might have flipped over both cards on purpose to show the table that I got lucky on him. It seems more likely, given how the hand was played and what I've seen from my opponent in previous hands, that he just went wild with 1-8 and wasn't quite sure what to do with it on that board. Regardless of if he had 1-8 or 2-8s, I don't think that he would have been able to call much more than 300. I'm glad that I went with the sizing that I did. We win a big pot, and we're just getting started. The very next hand I pick up pocket 10s under the gun. I open at 30. Small blind calls. He's the older gentleman who got it in against me earlier when I had kings. It's heads up. The flop comes king 8-4 with 2 spades. We've got second pair. Small blind checks. With an opponent who's already exhibited a willingness to take somewhat aggressive lines against me, I check back. I have plenty of value, and I don't want to get blown off my hand. The turn is the 5 of diamonds. Small blind checks again. Although this is a board that could connect well with the small blind's range, it's rare that I see someone check again on the turn with a strong hand once it's already been checked through on the flop. I'm comfortable betting for value. I make it 40. This is when things start to get very strange. The small blind check raises to 170. I'm very suspicious about this play. Since that pocket king's hand, I've gotten the sense that the player's going out of his way to come after me. I call one time to see what happens on the river. The dealer puts out the jack of clubs. It seems like a card that isn't great since 10s are downgraded, but in my mind, the river's a brick since there shouldn't be anything that the opponent would have check raised me with on the turn, either for value or as a bluff, that hits a jack unless somehow he pulled that move with 2 spades and one of them being a jack. Despite the river not changing much, I'm not thrilled to see the small blind bomb it for 400. I told you what my read is on the player, but can I really call a pot-sized bet with third pair? I've made some light calls when facing big river bets before, and I'm pretty much always wrong. People just tend to have it in these spots. Still, I'm on the fence because the player's line is odd. Maybe he has a hand like 9-7 and picked up a gutter then missed. I'm staring down my opponent looking for anything to sway me one way or the other. He doesn't look comfortable. I'm going to look like a complete idiot if this doesn't go well. I just don't think that he's got it. I call. The small blind isn't happy. He reveals that he has ace-3 of hearts. He has no pair. He turned a gut shot straight draw then tried to bluff me. I show what I owned his stole with, and everyone at the table's pretty shocked. There's nothing like making a hero call in a large pot and being correct. When I see another person at the table make a call like that and it's right, I make a mental note not to mess with that guy. Today, I'm that guy. When I look down at ace-jack suited under the gun, I raised to 30, small blind 3-bets to 130. This is the same dude that 3-bet the cutoff in the previous hand. You know when you play your friend in Street Fighter and he keeps using one move over and over? That's like this guy with 3-betting at the poker table. I call, we're heads up in position, the flop comes queen 6-3 rainbow, we've got 1 over and some backdoor draws. The opponent down bets to 100. I'm getting a good price and I'm in position. I call to see if I can improve. The turn is the queen of clubs, giving us a flush draw. The small blind checks. I see an opening to steal this. I bet 180 to potentially get ace king to fold. Taking pot control at this juncture allows me to either win right now, win a larger pot if I make a flush on the river, or it sets me up to fire as a bluff on the river if I get called and I miss my draw. Winning right now isn't going to happen because the small blind calls. The river is the 4 of spades, so we're not going to win a larger pot by making a flush either. We bricked it. The opponent checks. Luckily, I'm still set up well to represent trips. I assemble some firing power and I launch a bet at 630 out there. I'm fairly certain that the small blind doesn't have a queen. My bet puts all worse hands in a very difficult spot. Sometimes I'll even have quads here. The small blind tanks for almost a minute and a half. No big deal. I'll just sit and, hang out, contemplate how dumb I'm gonna look if this bluff doesn't work out. I can stop doing that because the opponent folds, we get it through. That's a risky play. Had it failed, I would have been stuck several hundred. I'm glad to have gotten the win. It's been an up and down session. Currently, we're up over 1,000 again and are back trending in the right direction after a little skid. Several orbits later, we've got ace-queen offsuit on the button. Under the gun +1 raises to 30. No need to 3-bet over an early position raise. I call. Small blind calls. The big blind also calls. We're going 4 ways to the flop in position. The dealer puts out king 10-4 with 2 hearts. We've got a gutter, 1 over, and a backdoor flush draw. It checks to me. I want to make sure that I'm able to realize some of my hand's value and potential. I check back to avoid getting raised. It's tough to get bluffs through 3 opponents anyway. The turn is the 9 of spades. Small blind and big blind check. They're almost never going to have anything strong because they can't allow people behind them to see free cards, and there's no reason to think that either the initial preflop raiser or I will take a stab at it after checking previously. Under the gun +1 happens to take a stab at it. He might be thinking along the same lines as me that the other 2 players will probably fold, so he only has to get through me. I might actually have him beat. If not, I've got a draw to the nuts, and I can rep the ace-high flush if another heart comes on the river. I call. If either the small blind or the big blind have second pair or worse, they won't be able to overcall. They'll have to fold plenty of better hands than what I've got. The small blind pulls a Richard Nixon and quits. The big blind may recognize what's going on, that under the gun +1 and I could both be weak. He puts in the check raise to 210. This makes 0 sense to me. I've been check raised 4 times today. This is the second time that it checked through on the flop, and an opponent went for the check raise on the turn. You probably remember the first time we were getting bluffed, and we punished the opponent for it. This has a very similar feel. Under the gun +1 folds, it's on me. The previous time the guy check raised bluffed the turn, I at least had some showdown value with a pair of 10s, so I was able to call him down. Here I've only got ace high, so I don't want to call. I might actually have the best hand, so I don't want to fold either. I also have good card removal, making it less likely that I'm going to be up against a straight. Plus, absolute worst case scenario, I have a draw to the nuts to bail me out. The big blind has about 1,100 more. I'm going to see if he wants to play for all of it.
All in.
The big blind immediately folds. He had nothing or close to it, just like I thought. My line didn't make any sense, and I actually could have had the best hand, but 3-bet bluffing seemed like a better option to accomplish my goal of winning immediately without having to improve. Plan B was to drill the straight if I had gotten called. That was a really unique situation in which the big blind recognized that I'll frequently be weak, and I re-recognized that that would be the case for him as well before ripping it in his face. We pick up king 8 suited in middle position. I stretch out the range a little and raise to 30. Small blind calls, the big blind calls as well. We're going 3 ways to the flop in position. It comes ace 10 deuce with 2 spades. We have the nut flush draw and a backdoor straight draw on a board that's good for my range. Checks to me. I bet 50 to represent an ace. The small blind isn't going to make things easy. He raises to 200. I don't look at calendars much, but I must have missed that today is National Check Raise Day. The big blind folds. With 2 cards to come and quite a few clean outs, I call. It's down to heads up. The turn is the 3 of hearts. We don't improve. Small blind bets 400. A call for that amount with 1 card to come is less attractive. I still make it because there's always a chance that the jack of spades will come on the river, giving us the absolute nuts. 3 spades on the board causes some concern for the opponent. He checks. You guys have already seen me bet on the larger side as a bluff in a few hands. I haven't done it for value at all today. I go for it, betting
1,200.
12?
Yeah.
1200.
It's too bad that I didn't show any of my previous bluffs because it would have set me up a little bit better to get called here. I was hoping that the opponent might have had a smaller flush and would have called immediately. That doesn't seem to be the case. He's a viewer of the channel and has seen me make some big bluffs in the past. Maybe he can find a call with a set of deuces or even 2 pair. In reality, I'm almost never bluffing in this spot. It's tough for me to even think of a bluff that I could have except maybe king jack of hearts, or perhaps if I just decided to get wild with king jack offsuit and the king of spades only floating the turn to bomb if a spade came off on the river. The small blind isn't sure whether to call or fold. He's going to do his best two-face impression and leave it up to chance. Watch him in the brown shirt closely and listen closely as well.
Heads, I call you.
The player says heads, I call you, and tosses a coin into the middle. You can see my hand immediately reach for my cards because the only words I process from his sentence is I call, and then I see him flick a circular thing into the middle. He said it all pretty quickly, and I almost turned my cards face up thinking that he called, and I won a massive pot. Luckily, I realized what actually happened, and I don't turn my cards over. I don't suspect that the player meant it as an angle, but he certainly could have gotten some more information from my reaction. In real time, it's pretty easy to be confused about what's going on in that scenario. Apparently, the coin landed on tails because the opponent folds. He's friendly with me after and would later tell me that he had ace-10 for 2 pair. The coin helps him out a lot. Still, we win another large pot. It's a new high point for the day. We're up over $2,500 on the session. After playing all morning, it's time to rack up a nice win.